It's my pleasure to present George Luxbacher to give his insight on some historical aspects of AIME and also what he sees as the path for us all in our industry in the future.
Thank you very much, John. It's interesting that I saw when John had me listed somewhere, and I can't remember whether it was on this or somewhere else. Forget all the rest of this. John had me listed as a Penn State graduate. And so everything else, forget. I'm a Penn State graduate, just so you know that. And I think I'm in good company here. So the very first thing I want to say is this was interesting. I have one of my mentors here, Raj Romney, and Raj has been a teacher, an educator, and he's been a mentor to me. And I think I was a disappointment to Raj. When I graduated, I elected not to go into academia. For whatever reason, I just felt like there was a different path. My wife was emphatic, and my wife is emphatic to this day. She says, I can't deal with academia. It's too, she just says, I can't deal with it. So I didn't go that path. But now I feel the sense of pride that Raj has every day with his students and how his students respect him. Because Nikhil got up here and said, I've made him interested in history. So Nikhil may be the only student I have that actually has an interest in what I ever had to say. And so I feel good. And Raj, now I understand why you have pride every day. So you never believed that was coming, did you?
I knew something was coming.
So when John asked me to give a little talk about the future, about AIME, some of the aspects of AIME and SME moving forward, I pulled this together. I apologize, I'm not a very professional speaker. You're going to see different fonts, different orientations on slides. I can't, but the message is what's important, not the presentation. So hopefully that doesn't offend anybody. I want to point out that I come from a mining background. Both of my grandfathers were bituminous coal miners in western Pennsylvania. So you see here my grandfather with one of his brothers. You can tell the date of the picture because of the open flame lamp. You can also see they probably were taking their pipe underground to smoke underground. This is my grandmother right here. You can see that she picked a very scenic place. This was in western Pennsylvania, so it's not a comb bank, it's a gob pile. But her and her sisters elected to have their picture taken at the gob pile.
Senator Laser.
Okay, right here is my grandmother and my grandfather. So you can tell that I am my dad didn't go into coal mining, but both my grandfathers were coal miners, so I'm a coal miner at heart. A graduation picture many years ago when I had, this was Raj remembers what I looked like back then. And Raj looked a little bit different back then too, but we won't talk about that. But I looked a little bit different, had no idea where I was going in the future. If you would have told me back then that ultimately I would have my name on the AIME President's plaque, along with people such as Herbert Hoover, and I just never would have believed that was ever possible. That was not where I was going in life. I had no idea quite where I was going, but that was not where I was going. Then this just happens to be me receiving a presidential citation plaque from the then president of AIME a few years after I was president the first time. I should mention that I'm probably the first person in 100 years to be repeating as an AIME president, but that's another story. But I was just so proud of getting that plaque, which recognized the interest I have in the history of AIME. So I do have some bona fides. I am a coal miner. I'm in Pennsylvania anthracite region, and I'm proud to be here. So thank you for inviting me. So AIME has changed a lot over the years. The nature of AIME and the four member societies it's really changed. And it was interesting. I spent a few minutes with the guy from Pennsylvania, PA, the cameraman, PAHome.org or whatever. Homepage, PAHomepage.org. And he asked me a little bit about how the organization is going to change. And I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go forward. But the organization really has changed a lot over the years. Michelle and I have tried to figure out what was the logo for the organization way back when. We really have no idea. But this is the first flag. In 1904, the first flag was just blue crossed hammers. And these crossed hammers have continued till Probably Nikhil decided to get rid of them, and we went with, we'll blame Nikhil, and we went with the globe. But these crossed hammers have been consistent through the years as to what this organization is and what it means. It really is mineral resources. So I'm really pleased that we have this consistency, and I feel comfortable that, especially since Mayor Brown has told us they're building 2 new hotels here, that probably we will celebrate, in 25 years, we'll celebrate the 175th. We'll move forward here. We'll be back. So the 120, let's see, I got to figure all that. Anyhow, we'll be back in every 25 years here.
I'll be 105, but I'll be here with you.
So all I can tell you, Mayor Brown, is I've retired once and I'm back at work, and I don't know when I'm going to retire. So life goes on, and hopefully we'll both be here to celebrate. Okay, this is an attested copy of the 1871 announcement, the meeting announcement that really went out to a number of people, inviting them to show up here in Wilkes-Barre on this day 150 years ago. The interesting thing about this, and this comes to the 22 that are on the plaque versus the 23 you hear about today. I hope that you have taken time and read my 3 articles I've had so far in Mining Engineering Magazine. They've been an absolute pleasure to write, because although Mike probably has found 100 different things I've done wrong in them, but that's neither here nor there. But they've been an absolute pleasure to write, because they're just so interesting to me as I go back and I read all this old stuff. And one of the things I found out was that Martin Coriel, how do you want to pronounce it? Coriel. So Martin Coriel, he attested on May 16th, he attested that call to meeting and everything. He was there in that room, but he's not on the list of people that was in that room, the first 22, because he forgot he was the secretary, even though they said Rossiter Raymond was the secretary. Rossiter Raymond takes credit for everything, even being at other schools where he was never at. But I don't think he did either. But he takes credit for everything. So Rossiter Raymond was the secretary, but Coriel was the guy actually taking the minutes, and he forgot to list himself as one of the people that was there at that first meeting. So for all this time, people have talked about 22 people showing up, and it was actually 23. So one of the things that's really critical here, and you look back, Thomas McNair has this little blurb about how he was invited. He knew about the circular, but he got invited to this meeting. So one of the things here, you all signed in there. And hopefully Michelle's going to scan that in, and at the 175th and 200th, that sheet where you signed in here today is going to be part of history. Thomas McNair had no idea he was going to be part of history. He had no idea what was happening there. But for the fact that his son wrote a book in 1951 where he pulled pages out of his dad's diary. And we have this little blurb that's interesting. This is not something that Rossiter Raymond put in the NMJ as part of his publicity. This is just a guy. And it's really neat that he just says, I'm on my way and I run into Rothwell. Rothwell hands me this thing. I show up when I'm supposed to be there. It's only me and Rothwell sitting in this room. Where's everybody else? And finally, a couple people dribble in and they decide they're going to the bar. They're going to meet in the Wyoming Valley Hotel club room, I think is a nice way to say the bar. And so that's where they met, was the bar. And they decided to form an organization. They already had rules. They took the rules from another organization in England, but this is the start. And it's really neat to find a little blurb like that informally says it. So you guys have signed in here today. You guys are all not part of history. This will show up in 100 years. So this little blurb here, I just wanted to say that it's uncertain. We know that these guys, the 23 were here in the room. The guys that were elected on 5/17 and 5/18, you really don't know if they were here, but they had all said, hey, we're interested in becoming a member. So they elected these guys as members. They may not have been here, they may never showed up here, but they became members because they said, we're interested. So if you look, so let's go back to the first 23. And it's neat to dissect those first 23. Mike has Mike has a 4-hour talk on the first 23, and he can tell you.
I'm more interested in the other guys.
Yeah, but Mike's into this. But I just wanted to point out that this was a very diverse group of people that met here. And these guys, most of them were probably members of ASCE, because ASCE was the professional society, and they were trying to figure out, can we justify our own society? Can we go off on our own? Most of them were colliery guys. This Pennsylvania anthracite, you heard the story about why Wilkes-Barre is the center of this. And these guys, this is why we had colliery guys. This was the main thrust of the whole thing. But you had a couple guys from Lake Superior copper mining. Of course, Coryell wasn't doing that at that point in time, but it's nice to say he was, because it gives more breadth to the organization. You had Drown, who was a chemist metallurgist. You had Silliman. And we heard about Silliman here. Of course we did. We heard about Silliman, and we didn't include Rothwell, and Rothwell taught at Lehigh, but Silliman was considered the only educator. And Silliman has his own thing he ties into Gettysburg, and if you read Silliman's book about being at Gettysburg, it's a neat book, it's a neat story. You had really the whole key to this, you had two journalists. The journalists were the guys driving this, because E&MJ needed material. And so you had Raymond, and Rossiter Raymond knew he needed material. Maybe we have a society, I got material and I can publish. So the organization decides that E&MJ is going to be their official organ, and that's going to be where everything's going to be published. So Rossiter Raymond got his stuff. You had a new graduate, soon-to-be graduate from Lehigh. You had Drinker, who was there, and so here's a student. So we started out, all 4 member societies. It's critical to us, our student members. Day one, the students were there. It's really neat when you think about it. And then we had 2 furnace operators. And it's interesting that Raymond didn't highlight who they were. He just said we had some furnace operators there. But it was Neil and Bramwell. The neat thing about Bramwell, we're all coal people, or most of us are coal people. Bramwell went on to found Bramwell, West Virginia, in the coal fields. So he was a coal guy. He just was a new graduate. He didn't know any better, so he was working at an iron place. The average age of these guys that I can find ages for, and I'm sure Mike has better info than I do, but the average age was about 34. The youngest guy was 19 years old. The oldest guy was about 74. 7 of them were foreign born. 2 of them were future presidents of Lehigh, not Lafayette, by the way. And like Bramwell had just come back. He had just been over in Europe, just finished up his degree in Europe, and just came back. And Petchin sent him, said, hey, I can't go to this thing, go to this meeting. So Petchin becomes a day 2 or day 3 member, I don't remember which, and Bramwell becomes a day 1 member. So I can tell you my involvement in SME is because I'm a young kid, I'm working at a coal company, and somebody can't go, and they said, you go to the annual meeting. And I'm like, annual meeting? I get to go to an annual meeting? Wow! And so I was sent, and here I am all these years later, past president of SME, 2-time president of AIME. So it's just neat that these things happen, and I think we need to continue to encourage them. So out of those 68 from that first couple days, the thing I want to point out is there were 7 presidents of this society. Those were the founders, those were guys, those were really well-known guys, a lot of them. And so there were 7 presidents. Unfortunately, only 2 of them are in the Mining Hall of Fame, which is amazing to me. Eckley Cox and Rossiter Raymond are the only 2. And it's something that we probably need to rectify. Somebody needs to take up the torch and nominate these guys for that Mining Hall of Fame. I would love to do it, but I'm also unfortunately still fully employed. So this is, I think, a Mike Korb thing to do. So it always, so I'm a mining engineer, and I was always really proud. This was back then 22, now we know it's 23, but 23 mining engineers got together. And Dave Carnegie used to always say, forget those other societies, because we're mining engineers. The rest of them, they're just along for the ride. Well, when you actually go back and look at what... So that's the point of this. It's all one thing. And that's what people don't appreciate. These guys were furnace guys, they were copper guys, they were metallurgists, they were everything. They were practical miners. So if you look, it just so happens that Darrow wrote a book called Coal, Iron, and Oil, or the practical American miner. I mean, it was all one thing. A mining engineer meant anybody involved in all this stuff. It didn't matter what you were. If you were an oil guy, you were a mining engineer. And the society kept its name as the American Institute of Mining Engineers, consequently, for a long time. And I have a slide that comes back on that one. So I love the fact that this book's there. This shows you that back then that's what they all thought they were. First president, they were really worried about being an elitist, a bunch of university-educated engineers. They were worried about that. They were worried about putting the organization out on its wrong foot. And so the first president they elected was David Thomas. David Thomas wasn't a university-educated guy. He was a guy who'd come over from Wales because he was working in Wales and came up with a way to use anthracite. He came over here to develop that for the U.S. So anthracite pig iron, David Thomas is the man. And they elected David Thomas didn't want anything to do with this because he was an old dude like me. But they elected David Thomas anyhow, and David Thomas wound up as the first president. It's neat to see he was also the first honorary member of AIME, and the second honorary member was a guy from England, Sir Lothian Bell, again an iron and steel guy. So this emphasizes the fact that mining engineers, we were one big fraternity, we encompassed everything. And we were practical miners, we weren't all university educated. So we've been here in Wilkes-Barre a number of times. And at Wilkes-Barre, I apologize for the mispronunciation, but we continue to come back here. This is our home. This is where we started. And to be honest, we would be back here in October, but for the fact we couldn't find a hotel large enough to accommodate what we wanted to do. That's why I'm thrilled to hear you're going to build a couple hotels. I think that's a fantastic idea, Mayor Brown. And I'd love to be back here again for another meeting. So you can see here, we were here for the founding. Our first technical paper ever given to the Institute was the Geographical Distribution of Mining Districts by, who else? Rossiter Raymond, because he has to have his foot in everything. The second, we came back for the 20th meeting, went over to General Oliver's gunpowder facility. Would have been neat to see that. That we came back, we were in Scranton and came back on Wilkes-Barre an excursion. We were in Glen Summit, came over here again from Glen Summit, went to Paul Oliver's, and they had the old timers had a campfire, and everybody, they had technical talks going on, and nobody went to the technical talks. Everybody sat around and listened to Oliver and all the old guys talk about the founding of the society. It'd be neat to have been there at that point in time and hear all that. The 1921 124th meeting, we had our semi-centennial. Where did we go? We visited, and I'll go to that in the next slide, but we also went to Wyoming Shovel Works in Wyoming, PA. And everybody came away with a little shovel with, you can see, American Institute of Mining and Metallurgical Engineers on the shovel. Because, and I put this in my column in mining engineering, but I got to re-emphasize this. The bulk of the coal in the U.S. when we were here in 1921 was hand-loaded. You didn't start really getting into any significant machine loading until the 30s and 40s. So Wyoming shovel, that was the premier shovel for coal mining. You were anthracite, bituminous, didn't matter. The premier shovel was a Wyoming shovel, and everybody got a Wyoming shovel when they came here to visit. So just a neat little thing. And then in 31, they came back for the 60th anniversary at the Iron Temple. It'd be neat if the Iron Temple gets restored and we can have another meeting there. I look forward to that at some point in time. And they had 40 different automobiles. We're starting to get into the automobile era here instead of buggies to go around. So compliments of Mike Korb and the Anthracite Coal Heritage Alliance Facebook page. It's neat to look back at the program from 1921 and see where they went and what all they looked at. This is impressive to see. And Mike just gave me a copy of this book. I'm looking forward to really studying it and looking at where they went. But it's just neat that we continued this tradition of going all over on these field trips and seeing all this stuff. So A couple pictures. This is really neat that we were able to see at the Historical Society. We were able to see this original plaque from 1971. 1925, or the 125th, the plaque unveil. We have Tom Falke here. Tom was one of my mentors. Raj tells me he was there. We probably had a couple other people that are still around that were there, but it's neat to listen to Raj here today because he was here at the 125th. He's here at the 100. You didn't come up. Did you come up for the 145th, Raj? Okay. Okay, but it's just neat that we've done this and we continue to come back, and we're looking forward to being back here again. Hopefully there's enough room on your wall there that we can continue to add segments to our plaque. Now, since we're in Pennsylvania, I got to throw a little blurb in here. My friends that graduated from Columbia, and hopefully there's not a Columbia grad in this room, is there? Good. My friends that graduated from Columbia like to say, we started mining engineering education in the U.S. And I always like to throw up, no you didn't. The first mining engineering education department in the U.S. was here in Philadelphia. And it was 1857 at the Polytechnic College of the state of Pennsylvania, and I happen to have the announcement that shows the graduates that year. One of the many things, I'm like Mike Korb, my wife can't wait to get rid of all this stuff that I've collected over the years. And I should mention too, I got to throw some things in about petroleum engineering here too. So petroleum engineering also started in the state of Pennsylvania. 1910, very first petroleum department in the U.S. at University of Pittsburgh. So mineral industry education. So we just, this slide is in here for Nick. I had an idea Nick was going to try to sneak something in about Lafayette. So I put this in so that Nick could feel proud. But I just wanted to show you where mining engineering education in the U.S. was around 1871 when we were formed. And you can see here you had Colorado, Michigan, MIT, Washington and Lee, Lehigh, and Lafayette. That was it. Those were the schools. And most of these guys that formed the society were either practical coal miners or they had been educated in a foreign institution. They had spent some time over in France or England or at one of those schools. But I feel obligated. I'm up in northeast Pennsylvania. I have to mention where the practical man got his education, International Correspondence School. My grandfather, I still remember as a kid, my grandfather's books on the shelf, and part of my grandfather's books were some ICS books. He did not go to college, but he was a practical mining guy. He was a mine foreman, mine superintendent, and ICS educated him. So it's just nice that we're here in an area where ICS was formed and really had a lot to play for the education of the practical coal miner. So just a couple minutes on the role of professional societies. This was from the first meeting. It said the object is to meet together for the purpose of reading papers and discussing subjects which have as their aim economical production and the safety and welfare of those employed in this industry. And the health and safety priority of the 5 papers given at the first meeting, 2 were on mine ventilation, a critical topic. I felt this was so important that one of the things the SME president used to do was write a little blurb for transactions. Barb, did you do that when you were president? So that had passed away by then. But you used to write the introduction to transactions for the year. And my introduction to transactions basically restated this because I felt this is still one of the primary purposes of SME to this day as the primary legacy society of AIME. And naturally, I threw a picture of Rossiter Raymond in because Rossiter Raymond was the guy who needed publications for ENMJ and is still looking at us today. Okay, I wanted to throw a quick blurb in here. It was like, what do I fit into this time? How am I doing on time? Well over. I'll try to speed up because Dave's going to yell at me. But one of the things I wanted to point out was the first woman member of AIME. AIME, actually, Ellen Swallow Richards joined the organization at the Montreal meeting in 1879. I encourage you to read the book, that was published by TMS, or come in October and listen to Barb give a lecture on Ellen Swallow Richards. But the thing I really wanted to point out, we are a welcoming society. We've been a welcoming society for years. We were the first professional society that let women sit on the banquet floor. And that was before Ellen Swallow Richards joined the organization. So at the Pittsburgh meeting in 1879, we actually let them come and sit on the floor. Nobody else did. Very welcoming organization. Going to the Historical Society the other day, they have a display on the suffragette, the suffrage movement, the women's suffrage movement. We were also, before before the law was passed to let women vote, we invited the major suffragette in the U.S. to be the banquet speaker for AIME and explain to us why we needed to support women's right to vote. Very impressive. Now, the second woman, it's always interesting. So it just so happens that Richards has, in his autobiography, he talks about meeting a woman who says, I'm trying to remember the exact quote on how he said it. But anyhow, he runs into the second woman, the woman who was elected after his wife. There could be nobody further removed than his wife than the second woman to join as a member of AIME. And she joined in 1894, and she has a long last name because she went through 4 husbands. She was on husband number 2 at the point she joined AIME, and she had 2 more after that. And she was called by the miners Captain Jack or Jack Pants. She was a miner's miner and did a royal job. And she died, she stayed a member of AIME until she died in Italy in 1931, I believe it was. So very impressive. Just a little blurb on women in mining. Okay, I want to talk about how Wilkes-Barre started a very, very long tradition of field trips. So I already mentioned whenever we had this little dispute about UCA, I wanted to point out to everybody we were involved in underground construction and everything early on. In 1873, our second year of meetings, we already went to Boston for the Boston Tunnel construction. We've done this, we've done some fascinating meetings. We did a meeting to Europe and Great Britain. Here's a proclamation. Thank you, Mayor, again for the proclamation. Here's a proclamation from the Institute of Civil Engineers of Great Britain. Naturally, this one comes from the ASME's office because like most 90% of AIME's artifacts, they're lost to posterity, so we don't have a copy of it. But it thanks us for our coming to Great Britain for that meeting, the 2-month-long meeting in 1889. I picked this one out just to show one. This was one that I thought, this was really interesting, and I used this in an SME presentation a while back. But this was one trip that they did where 116 members plus spouses did a trip to California for a month and a half that went through Utah and Arizona. They did 100,000 or 10,000 miles of railway travel and did a bunch of side trips and everything. Just a fantastic trip. But the neat thing about this is they stopped at Sutter's Mill, where California gold was found. And here you have there's 2 group pictures. And I looked at the 2 group pictures that were published in Transactions. And there's 2 things that stand out. This is the first one. You look, and here's Rossiter Raymond right there in the center. And you can tell. Look at Rossiter Raymond. Look at the hat. You can tell that's Rossiter. We'll talk again about the big gold statue there. The other one is James Douglas. And here's James Douglas. And it's almost like James Douglas knew, just like everybody signed in here tonight, you knew that this sheet will be shown at the 200th anniversary. James Douglas knew that he was going to be famous. Look at how he's posed here. This is the James Douglas gold medal. It's almost as if they took this pose off of that. So it's just fantastic. And then I threw this up. I'm not going to talk about this, but they went to the Copper Queen mine for Phelps Dodge. And it's just amazing how these guys were treated. They were royalty. They were mining engineers. These visits were just unbelievable. If I could go back in time, this would have been fascinating to do some of these trips. So they actually served dinner underground and went out of their way to do this. Some of these trips, there was a trip where they took everybody up to the anthracite mine and they dropped them down into a mine, 8 at a 10 at a time or something like that. It's just unbelievable to read these things.
Go up the next button. might go up the next book.
We don't want to hear that, Mike. That's we don't want to hear that. Nobody heard what Mike said. So, an early member snapshot. I think this was a neat quote. This is one of my favorite books if you've not read it. Mining Engineers in the American West. It's just a really neat book. And it's one I enjoy reading, and I happen to take this quote out of there. But in 1903, we had a membership of 3,300, and they had 2,250 change of addresses made in the prior 12 months. Just unbelievable that these guys moved everywhere. They went from camp to camp to camp. And so the quote was, there's 600 men who were as nomadic as the Kyrgyz of the steppes, which is over in Kazakhstan. It's just amazing to read this stuff and just think, back then they didn't have computers. Somebody had to manually figure out where were these guys at. Michelle would have quit a long time ago if she had to deal with that kind of stuff. Michelle has enough problems. AIME now has 4 members, really, the 4-member societies, and Michelle has enough trouble dealing with the 4-member societies. So I thought I'd throw this up. This is when Andrew Carnegie gave us money and said, build a building, people. And he says, you got to be in the same building. So this is where the founder societies actually started. And so originally we had 3 members, AIME, the mechanicals, and the electricals, and we all came together. We accepted Andrew Carnegie's kind offer of $1 million. He upped it to $1.5 million. The civils didn't come in until a few years later. The civils have to be difficult. And then we let the chemicals come in even later than that. This picture here has, let me go back. Okay, so this has, you can see our good buddy Rossiter Raymond, you can see Andrew Carnegie right there, and you can see John Fritz right there. 3 famous people. And that's, I just wanted to put up here. If you read my column, I pointed out they had a fancy key made to unlock the door to the building, and it had gold nuggets from Sutter's Mill on it. And I made the comment that Dave Carnegie, because SME is such an impressive society, that Dave must have a key very similar to this to unlock the offices at Littleton. Dave has bust my bubble. Dave says he has a key card that's broken that still works when he holds it up, and that's how he opens the door. It's just such a disappointment that we've sunk so low that he doesn't have a key with gold in it that he wears around his neck on a nice sash and everything. But life is what life is. What can I say? I just wanted to show you what our original building looks like today. Oh, let me back up 1 second. Just point out that we moved from this building to another building, United Engineering Center, and it's now the site of the 72-story Trump World Tower. So we sold it for $52 million. $9 million of that came back through us that went to the member societies. But I truly believe when we had the United Engineering Center, we were all together as an engineering profession. The civils, the mechanicals, the electricals, us, the chemicals. We were all together, and we lost that. While we still have something called the United Engineering Foundation today, we don't have the sense of being and ownership in the things we do for the profession. It's unfortunate. This is what our building, the original building, looks like today. It was sold and it's owned by Thor Equities. I just thought I'd show you how they've restored it. This is the original Engineering Society's library. That's what the library looked like at the time. So way back when in our era, but this is the entry into the building. Okay, I'm going to sort of skip over that just to say that we did work on the Panama Canal. We were asked by President Taft to take a look at the Panama Canal and tell them, is this, or what we doing here, reasonable? And this is the telegraph that's actually framed in the SME office coming back from President Taft, telling us, thanking us for going down to evaluate the canal. Okay, timeline. I'm just going to throw up a couple things here, and believe it or not, I actually am moving along on this. I just wanted to point out that our first local sections were in 1911, Pennsylvania anthracite. You guys represent the 10th section in 1914. Hopefully those dates are correct, Mike. Okay, he's nodding. And in 1917, we formed the WAMEs after World War II. I want to point out that is World War I. But I just want to point out, these guys are all talking about how the WAMEs, they're WAME scholar. I'm a WAME scholarship guy. I'm the first guy in my family to go to college, and the WAMEs were a significant help on getting me through college, and I appreciate that. So the WAMEs do a great job, and I hope we can continue their legacy going forward. But I wanted to point out that we merged with American Institute of Metals came into the society. The society already had made a decision that we were going to have divisions. Nobody had formed a division. They came in, and we got our very first division, the Institute of Metals division. So that joined in with us. So there was a name change. In 1919, we became the American Institute of Mining and Metallurgical Engineers. We were proposed 43 years earlier. Anybody who's dealt with nonprofits understands you can't do anything in a nonprofit and get people to agree. It is so difficult. So here it took 43 years, and I think part of the issue was there were a lot of people that believed mining engineers is still an inclusive term. It included metallurgists. Why would you change the name? Well, it took them 40 some years to convince them, and very close behind was the name American Institute of Mining, Metallurgical, and Geological Engineers, but it was too cumbersome to say, so they decided, no, we're not going to put that in. Then a few years later, 56, they added the petroleum engineers, so it became cumbersome anyhow. So the geological engineers we have in the society would still like to stick geological engineers back in there. So the petroleum division came in 1922. When the petroleum division came in, and remember, the very first paper for petroleum was in 1876. So we had been doing papers on petroleum. It was no big deal. But the division was formed in 1922, and suddenly we added a derrick behind the crossed hammers. So that's where that change came. And so here's my first petroleum paper. I'm sorry, I thought I had this as an earlier slide. But you can see the first paper had been in 1879, and first courses are Pittsburgh and Berkeley. It became a technical committee in 13, and then Pitt gave out degrees in 15. And the standing committee chair was Anthony Lucas. Petroleum engineers give the Lucas Medal. We actually have a salt guy here, so he knows all about Lucas. But Lucas started out as a salt prospector. He's actually from Croatia, which is part Croatian, and he was doing drilling down at Avery Island and down there, and he realized there's a relationship between salt domes, oil, sulfur, and all this. And so he actually turned this into a deal where he hit the Spindletop gusher in 1901, and he's considered the founder of modern petroleum reservoir engineering. Just the same tie back. We're all one family. We're all in the extractive business. So a little bit more on the timeline. You can see here that started the whole division trend. We had the iron and steel division, the coal division, the educational division, the industrial minerals division, ore treatment division, and finally in 1957, the divisions decided they wanted to break out into societies and start down their own path. Just a couple things here just to show what we did. In 1928, we, with the other founder societies, we paid for Carillon to be erected at the University of Leuven, and it was in memory of all the engineers who died in World War I. And the University of Leuven gave us these bells here, one to each society. Ours happens to sit in SPE's office right now. This is a bust of Hoover that was given to AIME. It currently resides in the Mechanical Engineers building in New York City. How it got there, I haven't a clue. So with this timeline, I want to make sure I don't miss comments here. So our timeline here, you can see we went from divisions to societies. So suddenly AIME is the parent, and we have children, and our children have grown up. So in 74, the Iron and Steel Society was formed from TMS. The society's incorporated in 1984, and we had our 125th anniversary celebration in 1996, primarily at TMS's annual banquet in California. If you haven't looked at the program, it's in the back of the room there. And in 2003, we moved the office from New York to Colorado. I think at the time we made the move, we had 4 employees, somewhere around that, 4 or 5 employees. Because the societies had basically, the member societies had already moved out. The petroleum group was in Dallas. AIM or SME, our society moved to Utah and then to Colorado, and the other two societies had moved to Pittsburgh. So really there were very few people. And so you can see here our artifacts have been basically scattered across the four societies. There's a lot of things that we've lost. We have pictures, we have all sorts of things that have just we've lost over the years. It's neat to see what's happened with the four societies. The four societies have continued the legacy just like AIME did. It's just we've expanded our efforts so much more than we were at the time, because it's amazing what you can do with more volunteers. So we had a very small organization that's grown. We're at 200,000 members, and you can't control that with one organization. It has to develop and it has to grow, and that's what's happened. And so this SME put together this shadow box at the 50th anniversary, 1957. They split out, and so in 2007 SME had a gala banquet. We all wore tuxedos and everything, and they unveiled this shadow box, which is very impressive. It's in SME's headquarters. So the thing I wanted to point out here is we have 4 member societies. We're part of the United Engineering Foundation, and that United Engineering Foundation has these 4 members here, or 5 members in total, and we represent the worldwide engineering community. And it's such a privilege that AIME's legacy continues to this day through its 4 member societies. It's just very impressive. So AIME had a reason for existence because AIME was the organization. We had divisions, but AIME was the organization. This is a brass plaque that used to be, I assume, on the building in New York. I have no idea. Do we know where it's at? We still have it? Where's it at?
It's in Denver.
In Denver? Okay. So we still have this brass plaque that sits in Denver, but it talks about the reason why AIME existed. And really what I'd like to point out is AIME has adapted because we are different. We are 4 member societies and we have adapted. And our 4 member societies continue 100% on the legacy of what AIME stands for. But we as AIME, what is AIME today? We honor our legacy as a valued partner with our member societies. And we have a mission. And I cross out facilitating interaction because at the board meeting here we took that out of our bylaws, or not our bylaws, our charter, but it's still part of what we do, and it's part of what we're going to do going forward. So we still have a function. So I wanted to point out that AIME has 18 awards, 3 scholarships, and 12 named endowments that honor AIME's legacy. A couple of these, here's a James Douglas Award. How many of us in here remember the Mud Fund? They gave us free books when we joined SME. So I still have my copy of De Re Metallica, and I have my copy of Free Gold. And there was a whole slew of different books. It was neat that I got that when I joined SME, compliments of the Mud Fund. So, what did I do? I messed up my slide. Okay, here we go. So here's just a couple things on what we do. One of the most important things we do is we provide a forum for our member society engagement. If AIME didn't exist, our 4 member societies would go their separate path. They'd never come together to talk. We're all mining engineers. We were mining engineers to start. We're mining engineers today, irrespective of what title you have. And so it's nice that we can provide that forum to bring the 4 member societies together to talk. We're doing oral histories. SME has 28 oral histories out of the 52 that AIME has done. The oral histories are unbelievable. They're on our website. If you haven't listened to our oral histories, some of these are just phenomenal. We're about to do Raj's, if we can ever get Raj to sit down long enough. Unfortunately, Raj is busy and it's hard to find time in his schedule to get him to sit down and give us an oral history. But we are interested in anyone who's interested in doing an oral history. This is it's our opportunity to capture your thoughts on the industry and on, they're just phenomenal things. I love listening to them, and if you haven't, I encourage you to go and listen. We give awards. SME gets the lion's share of the awards. We give 10 of 18 that AIME gives. Dave Carnegie keeps on talking about how much the members love to go to the awards banquet, and they wish it was longer so there were more awards, and we could just all enjoy in the pleasure of receiving awards. It's a direct quote, right, Dave?
The old members.
We give a lot of scholarships. We have the Young, the DeWitt, and the Marshall scholarships. Anybody in here remember the name John Sidney Marshall from the anthracite region? We honor his legacy. He was a consulting engineer up here, left us, in his will, he left us $1 million+ subject to his wife surviving him at death. She lived to 93, somewhere around in there, and she managed to spend $1 million down quite far, and I think at the end of the day we got $160,000. God bless her. I'm glad she lived a long, prosperous life. But we honor John Sidney Marshall's legacy through the Marshall scholarships, and we would encourage Pennsylvania Anthracite to show to help us find some worthy candidates. The Coal Division administers that. We do milestone recognitions, we do funding, we do collaborative efforts. So here's our cake. We didn't get a cake tonight because we had some little hiccups, but anyhow, we've done cakes. I wanted to point out that one of the things that AIME always did was go on field trips. So on my second trip through AIME presidency, my first trip through in 2012, I said, we got to start doing this again. They were going to locations, but never doing anything related to mining. So in 2012, I took everybody to Pebble Mine. So we went up to Alaska and we visited Pebble Mine to see what they were doing up there. Fabulous trip. And we've let everyone, so when it's an iron and steel guy, we've been to a steel mill. We've done some great trips. Oil and gas guy, we went to Thumbs Long Beach, which are islands outside of Long Beach where they do mining or oil drilling, and we all took the group out there. So we've done some great field trips, trying to make the trustees understand that we're all in this together. We also have what's called the Order of the Dead Mackerel, Scombus Mortis, which we revived on the 140th anniversary. That's how you can identify a past AIME president. Nick has his on there. I have mine on here, and so we have dead mackerel, which is a neat little thing that you can identify an AIME past president. The TMS loved this so much they created the Order of the Dead Fossil, and they have this huge dead fossil. I think their current version's a little bit smaller, but they have this huge dead fossil that a guy sticks on his. It's really interesting. We have a lot of fun. So I never repeat slides, but all I'd like to say here is Rossiter Raymond was the guy from 1871 through 1911 that kept us on our path. He really set this society up for where it's going. When you walk into SME's offices today in Colorado, the very first thing you see is this near life-size plaque of Rossiter Raymond, and he really is the man who set the stage for what is today AIME and its 4 member societies. We owe him a lot of thanks. The thing I want to point out is SME was established 64 years ago. Wow, 14 years ago we celebrated the 50th for SME. Amazing. But SME is doing the same thing. We're advancing technical development, production, processing, applications, health and safety. We're doing dissemination of knowledge, networking, personal growth, lifetime learning. That's what this is all about. I wouldn't miss this ride for the world. I should have put back in here the picture of me when I was sitting there at graduation. I never dreamed I would get to where I'm at with this, and this has been a tremendous thing. And I really applaud Pennsylvania Anthracite for everything you've done here on keeping your traditions and heritage alive and helping us at AIME. I'm going to say that SME will serve its future, its generations going into the future. So I like to throw this slide up a lot. Obviously, this is some of my grandchildren. You can see when you have a grandson who's on his walker has a Friends of Coal sticker that we are a coal family. I have a son and daughter-in-law who are both mining engineers and both committed to the industry. So you can see my grandson's grown up a little bit there, a little bit more there. And my granddaughter when she was a little bit low. These are just some of my grandchildren, but these ones are my mining grandchildren. They hold a special place in my heart because they're mining grandchildren. They're just not grandchildren. So I hope that my grandchildren can be back here in Wilkes-Barre. Once the new hotel's built and we have enough room to hold a meeting here, we'll be back. So I hope my grandchildren will be able to be here. And if you're interested in learning more about AIME, don't bother any of this stuff. Just talk to Mike Korb. Mike Korb can talk to you longer than I could even think about talking to you about. And Mike's probably already identified 50 things I said wrong up here. But Mike can talk to you. But if you are interested, we have the history of the Institute. I think we still probably have a few of these books laying around if you're interested. We have a web page. The web page gives you links to everything. We have a digital library. If you're interested in a digital library, we can give you access or you can get on it through OneMind. Just let us know. So with that, I'm going to tell you that I'll answer questions, but I'm going to tell you that I took this little slot of the derrick because this is AIME marching forward. And my opinion is AIME continues its path marching forward. Every day is a learning day for me. I hope you've enjoyed this brief little summary of things as much as I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions.